strategic planning conversations that we're going to have 3 sessions this month, and the first one's this afternoon. Shameless plug for you to stay and have some lunch and tell us what you're thinking. As I was preparing for that, of course we want to have any kind of strategic discussions grounded in our vision and mission. It caused me to walk out of my office and pull this off the wall and stick it in my office and kind of look at it, make sure I really knew what the mission and vision of Open Circle is. And so I brought it so that you can see it quickly.
Can't read it.
Well, you can't read it, but that's okay. I could read it to you, but that's not important right now. If you come at 12 o'clock, you'll hear it. The most important thing on here that I hadn't really noticed before is at the very bottom of the mission, if you kind of look down, it talks about that we're here to create beloved community. And I'd never seen that before. And often when I see beloved community, I'm like, yeah, that means we all get along, right? And I thought, well, wait a minute, no, beloved community is far more than that. So I did some research on exactly what beloved community meant. Now, many of you know that it wasn't created by Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., but he certainly popularized the term. Whoops, my file just went away. Hold on a second. Sorry about that. He popularized the term, but it actually had to do with a very global vision that was beyond just what the crowd he was talking to that day or even the United States. He was talking about the entire planet, and it hung on a few principles. The first was that all people all around the globe share wealth together. And then, of course, if that's going to be something that we do, then poverty, hunger, and homelessness are not tolerated and would be resolved if we're sharing wealth across the world. Next was racism and all forms of discrimination would be replaced by all-inclusive spirit. So in other words, we wouldn't even think about racism and discrimination and bigotry because it had been replaced by this spirit that we're all-inclusive all the time. And that disputes would be resolved by peaceful conflict resolution and reconciliation. And of course, there would be no more military conflicts because if you're resolving through peaceful means. So that's beloved community. So I wasn't here when these mission and vision statements were created, and I'm sure it was focused more on beloved community within this congregation, but that statement is much broader than just this congregation. And I do believe, given that we have things in there listing honoring justice and peace, that we really did lean towards Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s vision of beloved community. Well, as we all know, we're far from the beloved community that he was thinking of, and we're frankly not headed in the right direction. I could stand up here and talk about all kinds of statistics, but you've heard it. So just the general thoughts on that by bullet point. Wealth, of course, is more concentrated today than it's been in almost a century. Poverty, hunger, and homelessness are on the rise, and they're stretching resources and charitable institutions to try to fill the gap. Many of you are involved in the Fondy Food Pantry and are very at first-hand knowledge of this. The Black Lives Matter and the Me Too movements, I think, are 2 very obvious examples of racism and discrimination that are very much alive and well, unfortunately. And then diplomacy by the United States seems to have become a relic of the past. We're quick to demonstrate our military might and bully others, and then kind of say, well, here's the diplomatic agreement you have to sign at the end of it. And then no military conflict? We've been in an active war for a whole generation now. My kids know nothing else other than the Iran and Iraq wars. And then, of course, the power in the United States that have fostered these trends have done everything possible to stay in power and keep it going. We all know about the voter suppression via stricter and frankly unnecessary requirements. There's lots of talk about there being voter fraud, but it's never seen any proof of it at all. There's the purging of the registration lists prior to a major election. So this is one of those I didn't get it until somebody helped me look under the surface. Of course you purge the voter rolls of old names and things like that. But the idea was to do it so aggressively and right before a major election makes it more difficult for people that are a little bit more mobile or don't vote that often Friend of mine is the co-chair of the Democratic Party in Brown County. He said, all of us should frankly go out and see if our name's still there, because you're not even sure, even if you vote in every election, you can't be sure that it's going to be there. So that's really how aggressive it is going to be. There's the gerrymandering of the voter districts. We know that in both parties have done this across many states to make sure that they stay in power. There's all kinds of misinformation campaigns out there, the one I talked about with the voter fraud being our biggest problem. And frankly, it's now led to the perception that voting is a very, very complex process and frankly not worth the effort, because we all know what the outcome's going to be anyway, right? So, with that in mind, I was very heartened to see that our own denomination, the UUA, has decided to take this on head-on as a religious organization. And you heard the words of President Susan Frederick Gray and how moved she is to want to do something about it. Some of you were here, I think it was January 12th, if I remember. It doesn't matter what the date was. But we had, they kicked off this campaign with a live video conference across the whole country at the same time. It was a Sunday afternoon at 3 o'clock, and I think about 10 or 12 folks stayed around or came back here. And I was in Stevens Point doing the same thing at my other congregation, but I heard you had a great discussion here, and I know Judy sent out notes, and in those notes I read that Mary Beth had decided to stand up and be our leader for our congregation for the initiatives. So when I had scheduled this sermon to speak, I'm like, well, I can build it up like why we should care, but I'm going to have Mary Beth come up and talk about what we are planning to do, and then we're going to open it up for some discussion and questions and answers, and if you've got ideas as well. So it'll be a little bit more informal today. So Mary Beth?
Good morning. First, I'd like to ask everybody who came to the meeting to stand up, please. The UU the Vote meeting. Thank you very much. It was really nice to walk in and see such a big group, because I saw the feeds from other places, and we always stand up in Fond du Lac, so I'm really, really proud of that. And it was a really great afternoon. Many of you know that I'm passionate about voting. I don't care what your politics are. I believe democracy is about voting, and so I want everyone to participate. That's my goal. I would love to see us at 99% here in Fond du Lac. We get pretty high, but I'd like to see us much higher than that. So what we talked about was to concentrate on two specific areas, and I'm going to speak about that a little bit this morning, and I encourage you to join us. There are, as Jim said, it's become very complicated. So one of the first issues is registering to vote and getting people registered to vote, and I'm going to speak about that in a little bit more in depth. And then the second thing is getting people to the polls. For many of us, it's easy, we don't think about it, transportation is not an issue, but that's not the case for a lot of people in our community. And I think of this man who comes to the polls. I work at the polls at Lakeside Park. And do many of you remember that snowy election we had? I think that was 2018. It snowed on election day. It was quite a snowstorm. And this man walked all the way. He lives, I think it's about a mile away. And he came in, and we were all just like, wow, this really matters to you. And one of the poll workers took him home. But that really enforced for me how important it is to be able to get people to the polls, because I know there are a lot of people who didn't come because of the weather. And in regular circumstances, it's the amount of time it takes. So those were the two things that we decided that we really wanted to work on, and I'm sure we can add other things in the future. We're just kind of getting started. So the thing that I wanted to start out with here and to ask you to be a part of this is for everybody to become a steward for voting in Wisconsin. And we have a really great tool to do that. And I'm going to say this over and over again until you have it memorized. It's myvote.wi.gov. myvote.wi.gov. It is the state of Wisconsin's online portal for everything you need to know about voting. So you can take out your smartphone now You can do it later when you go home. I have my computer here. I'm happy to help you later on. But you want to know that place, and I would ask you to send other people to that place as well. So the first thing you can do is go there and check yourself. As Jim said,
Could you say it again?
it's my vote, M-Y, and then V-O-T-E, and then it's .wis. This is where I get mixed up. I always want to do .gov, but it's .wis.
With.
W-I.
Yeah.
W-I. I'm sorry, see?
No.
It's easy to get confused. But if you type in my vote, usually in Google, you'll get there. So it's myvote.wi.gov. Okay, and just for your information, nobody can go out there and just buy a .gov website. Those are restricted to government entities. So if you go to a .gov website, you know it's reasonable information. So one of the reasons I want to direct you to this portal is there are a lot of organizations out there doing different work. They'll say they help you register to vote, but if it's got a .com after it, they're there to collect your information as well. So be careful. And there are a lot of good organizations, but I would like you to help with training the citizens of Wisconsin to go right to the main portal. So you go there, and there's various things you can do. So let me ask you, well, I won't ask you this. You can go there and check if you're registered. It'll ask you to put in your name, and that would be your name as you are registered with, and it'll ask for your birthday. And then it'll pull you up if you are registered. And if it doesn't pull you up, you will not be in the poll book. So you're not technically registered to vote. Okay, so that's the first important main thing that everybody needs to do, make sure you're registered. And why do you want to be registered and shown in My Vote? The big reason is when you go to the polls, you'll be in the poll book. You know, everybody talks about us having in-site registration, on-day registration, and that's great, but you want to be in the poll book. Because if you aren't in the poll book, you have to be re-registered, and that's where all the trouble comes. So let me tell you a little more and why you need to check this today about what Jim was talking about the voter purges. It is normal that the voter list gets cleaned up. It always happens every 4 years. And that's a normal process of keeping a big database of a lot of people. Wisconsin introduced something new, which is the ERIC system, and now that's happening much more frequently. It's tied to the DMV records. So all of you have heard about the latest issue with it, and that it's in litigation. Have any of you moved in the last year? Okay, you might be one of the ERIC people. Has anybody here registered a car in a different jurisdiction than where you vote? Okay, it's not pretty likely to happen here, but if you did that, you are likely to be deregistered in the ERIC system. So this is part of what has happened in Wisconsin. Our clerk explained this to me. A lot of people in communities where they have wheel taxes, are you all familiar with wheel taxes?
Yeah.
They're now taxing you for your car, and you have to pay an extra $100 in that community. To avoid the wheel tax, they're registering their vehicles like at their vacation cottage. Okay, so guess what happened to those people? They've been thrown off the voter list because they're taking that DMV record and considering them moved. And that's why the numbers are so high. So it's this new complication that's been added in. And my attitude is what we can do is instead of being mad about the complication, give people information. Get organized, use the tool, and we won't have to worry about it. It may be what it's going to be. Maybe we can change some of that, but that's the important thing. So, myvote.wi. And did you want to ask a question?
Wasn't there a date that had to be done by?
The purge?
Uh-huh.
It has not been done because it's in court. They haven't done it, and they're not going to do it before the April election.
One of the reasons it went to court was because there was a date that it had to be done, and It was not possible.
Well, that's correct. What happened was, supposedly by the law, the purge was supposed to happen within 30 days. And the Wisconsin Commission that is in charge with that, which is half Republican, half Democratic, it's meant to be bipartisan. They locked down the vote, and then you had the League of Women Voters come in and ask them to delay because of issues with the list, and then you had the opposite group, which is Will, come in and ask them to go forward with it. And it's still in the courts, and as of right now, nothing will happen because it's in the courts. So that's kind of where it stands. But we can all counter that by being wise and spreading the word to other people about myvote.wi.gov.
Mary, I just checked on the website and I am not registered to vote.
Wow.
And I have voted in every election since forever.
Wow, well, we need to check that, Judy, with you after, because it said like 7% of people have been thrown off the rolls. And I saw a headline from an article in Milwaukee about all these people, prominent people who have not moved, who have been kicked off. So, and here's the other thing, and this is unfortunate. How many of you have a Wisconsin driver's license? Or ID? Okay. Do any of you have a Wisconsin driver's license that does not match your voting address? Okay. Are you registered to vote at that address?
At my current address, not on my driver's license.
Okay. All right, so there's issues also with that. To register where you live is very important. Okay? If you have a Wisconsin driver's license, you can do all of that online. But you have to go, if you need to change your address, you have to go to the DMV site first, and then you have to come back to the voter registration site. So it's a little complicated. And now I'm going to add in the third complication, which is why we're not going to be able to help Judy today. 20 days before the election, the online site shuts down.
Oh, no. Really?
So we're into the 20 days because there's an election February 18th, so we cannot help you today with registering online. So we're cut out of registering online from 20 days before the election till the election, and then the next day it turns back on. Now there's a fairly reasonable reason for this, and that is because the clerks have to prepare the poll books. But you can still go into wherever you vote, and you could go early vote. So if you live in the city of Fond du Lac, you can go in tomorrow and early vote at the city county government building, and you can re-register. You will have, if you have moved, you will have to bring a proof of where you now live. Okay, so you can't do it just through fixing it in the online portal. This is why it's become so complicated. But you'll be able to vote at the same time. All right, and that voting at your clerk only applies until, I think it's 4 days before the election. In our case, it's the Friday before the election. That's the cutoff. And then you have to do it at the polls. Okay, yes.
Hasn't there been some instances of throwing out early voting ballots?
Okay, that's a different issue. So let me go there on the next step.
Okay.
One of the other things you can do on that portal is you can ask for an absentee ballot. Anybody ever requested an absentee ballot? Okay. You can do that right now. You can go there if you're not going to be here on the 18th for the primary, and you can request an absentee ballot and it will be sent to you. Okay, can somebody describe, would somebody like to describe what they do, John, with an absentee ballot? Have you gotten one in the mail?
It's been a long time. I think I might have taken it down to Cheetah Town Clerk and done it somehow, like, so I don't know if it was early voting or whatever, but yeah, I did. Missing election day, so I took care of it beforehand.
Yeah. So one of the things when you get an absentee ballot, it comes in an envelope, and you have to have another person register and sign that envelope. And I think they have to be a United States citizen, because Barb, who's not here, I think she told me about her son who lives in China. And he goes a long distance to be able to vote because he has to find another citizen to sign his ballot. Okay, those are the same, if you, anybody here early vote ever in Fond du Lac? Or anywhere, walk in and early vote? Remember, you put it in an envelope, and then the clerk there signs that ballot, right? What happens when absent, because that is an absentee ballot. An early vote is an absentee ballot. Those ballots go into they go into a box. They're very well taken care of here. And they are brought to the polls on election day and opened at the polls on election day. All right, on the outside of that ballot, those signatures have to be a certain way for it to be valid. And what you're talking about, Sylvia, is examples of that not being valid.
Because they can't read somebody's signature.
Well, or it wasn't the right person. It's not because they can't read it. It would be because it's always all in the technical steps of what they signed here or what they did there. It's all about catching the little rules. So that's another whole issue. So, yep.
Well, having worked at the polls, excuse me, when the absentee ballots come in, then you who are working at the polls have to run them through the machine.
That's right.
If the machine rejects it, that's a lost ballot because there's nothing you can do if the machine rejects it.
Not necessarily. They will look at it, and if
Well,
they can
yes.
remake it, they will remake
If you
it.
can,
Yeah.
without altering somebody's vote in some way. But that's virtually impossible if it's messed up that way. If they voted for 2 people and they should have only voted for 1, there's nothing you can do. You don't know which one they voted for or wanted to vote for.
Correct.
So
Which
then
is-
it's a lost ballot. So
Well, actually, they will remake it, at least in my wards, they'll remake it and not for that one. They'll do all the rest of the votes.
Yeah.
I mean, it depends on your jurisdiction, and this is a really good point to bring up. If you voted absentee and did it yourself, and you wonder if your vote counted, because I've had people tell me this, oh, I'm not going to vote absentee because I know they won't count my vote or whatever. You can go to myvote.wi.gov and you can see when you voted. It'll give your voting history, and it'll tell if you voted at the polls, which is a P, or absentee, which is an A. So you can always find out if you voted and if it was recorded. But that's a very good point to make about your ballot. When you vote in person, that ballot, if you mark 2 people, so for instance, let's talk about this election coming up, the primary. There are 3 names on the ballot, and that's it, these 3 names. How many votes do you think you get?
What?
A lot of people will think you get 2. And the poll workers will be very good about telling you, you get to vote for 1. But there are people who will vote for 2. I mean, you know, we're human. They bring that ballot will not go through the machine. And they bring that ballot back to the poll workers and they get a second chance. Okay, then they go through again. If they mess up the second time, they can bring it back one more time. So you have 3 strikes, you're out on that ballot. So that's one reason why it's a good idea to really read carefully if you're doing an absentee ballot. When you absentee vote at the city, I think they check it. Because they're very, very careful to try and make sure that everybody's votes are being counted. Okay?
Okay, any other, do you have more? Or you want questions? Or comments, or?
Well, I have one more ask for
Okay.
you, and that is that you go there and become intimately familiar with myvote.wi.gov. There's a couple other things it will tell you. Number 1, it'll tell you the next election and what's on the ballot. Do you remember when they used to publish those?
Yeah.
I don't know if they still do that because I never see
Not
it,
usually.
paper or whatever. But it's all there. It's not the actual ballot, but you can see who's on the ballot. Number 2, they will tell you you can find out who all your elected officials are. And I won't embarrass you by asking you who they all are, because like Judy and Lisetta are down on the bottom, and most people don't know that we are on. You can go there and find out who your elected officials are.
I
So-
won't be honest.
I know. But you're there now.
But
You're there now, because you are, I mean, it shows who represents you.
okay,
Down to your county supervisor district, which is the smallest district,
okay.
you know, that represents you. gives you your city council member names, and that used to not be up to date. It is now up to date, and they do it quite closely. So you can go there and find all of that information, and that's really good information for you to know. Okay, so those are the things I'd like you to be able to do. Go check your registration, go check who your elected representatives are, and check your ballot. And please ask all your friends and family to do the same thing. And then my last thing to ask is, please come and join us. We're gonna need a lot of people to help us, especially for the rides to the polls.
Yeah, so to summarize then, what Open Circle is planning to do at this point, our ideas.
So Open Circle, what we're going to do is work on registration for people. And we plan to have a Thursday night session here. I think we were gonna do it we haven't figured out the exact time. We've decided Thursdays. People can register for the city at the city government building any day, but that closes at 4:30. So our hope was to become a place in the community at night where you can go and get registered and help people understand that. In addition to that, there is a barrier for people to get their driver's license. You know, here in Fond du Lac, if you don't have a car, the bus only goes to the intersection or where the Holiday Inn is. You know, you have to go out to the DMV building.
Yeah.
So, you know, there's a bit of a barrier there. I mean, the time alone, it's gonna take you 2 or 3 hours to get there. So that's the other thing we would like to work on. There's another organization that does that work, and we're hoping to partner with them, and other people within the community as well. And then that second thing would be rides to the polls, which we'll do in November. And then there's also a primary election in August, so probably we'll kind of try it out in August. And then November is going to be when we're really gonna wanna push for that.
Okay, so in the future, we'll be doing announcements and helping
Yes.
people understand when to sign up and all that kind of stuff, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, yeah. Did you want to take any questions, comments, anybody?
At Marion, the Social Justice Committee I'm on, somebody was saying that you can now register completely online. You don't have to show up at any office or
That's
any.
correct. You have to have a Wisconsin's driver's license or ID card to do that, but that's correct. It's very easy, actually. One more thing I want to tell you too, in case any of you are re-registering or whatever, or you know anybody registering, after you register, you receive a card in the mail. And you should receive that card to know you're registered. You can go back to the site and see it as well, but look for that card, because that's also going to give you your polling precinct, and that's how you know it worked.
At Marion University, is the card valid for ID now?
It doesn't matter, because the city clerk is working very closely with them so that she sends out a list. We don't need to worry about them. They're working very closely with Maggie.
I'm registered,
Okay,
wrong name.
okay, there you go. Yeah. I was like, you didn't move or
Yeah.
do anything with your car.
I remember hearing something about, as of October 2020, that driver's licenses have to have a star on them to be federally valid to fly. Is that the same for registering to vote? You need a star on your driver's license?
You do not, and that's another big issue, and here's another little thing that I want to add in for you. To register to vote, you need a valid, non-expired driver's license, Wisconsin ID card, and then there's a whole list of other things. Please don't be distracted by the whole list of other things, because almost everybody uses the Wisconsin driver's license or the Wisconsin ID card. Okay, but let me get to that. Don't be distracted by that, first of all. The first question to ask people registering, do you have a Wisconsin driver's license? And if they say yes, it's easy. If they have a Wisconsin ID card, which comes from the DMV, and it's valid, that's great, that's all you need. Okay, so that's the registering issue. Now we have to go to the second part, which is voting. Okay, and in the second part, that's voter ID. That is how you prove who you are. So for voter ID, your Wisconsin driver's license or ID card can be expired. Okay, as of right now, it can be from, I think it's the last main election fall, so it would be November 6, 2018. If it was valid on November 6, 2018, it can be used for voter ID, which is when you go to the polls to get your ballot. Okay. That big long list of stuff you see for voter ID, like college students, what you're worrying about there, that's different than registration. Okay, so you still have to bring your driver's license in when you go to vote.
Okay.
To that question, the Wisconsin driver's license, you said before, if you've moved, if your address is different on that license, or if your name is different because you're married, what about that?
So you can go and change those things at the DMV. I'm not sure about the name, but I know for the address. You can go to the Wisconsin DMV site and you can change your address. There's no charge for that. You don't have to go in to do it, you can do that online. And then you need to go and re-register to vote, and it'll happen automatically because you've done it at the DMV site. Okay? When you go in to vote, you'll be okay, because it doesn't matter if the address isn't right on the driver's license. It's just got to be you, and it's the expiration date that they're looking at. You can go in and get a new ID, but you have to pay for it. So that's part of what they're trying to avoid, is making you pay for another driver's license. But that's the process you should do.
Okay, what about when, I did registration at the polls and it was really confusing, but.
It is, it's very confusing.
Many people had to bring in proof of residency, a gas bill or something like that. And that is, I don't even remember why that was.
So that's if you don't register online. Okay, so let's say you moved. Your driver's license now has a new address, right?
Mhm.
You go into the polls to vote. First of all, you don't really know where you need to go, because where you vote is based on your address. So really what you want to do is the minute you move, go to the DMV online and change your address. And then come back over to the registration and register online. If you go to the polls, you have to come in with proof of your new address. And this is where everybody gets confused, and believe me, I've worked those polls doing that as well, and it's extraordinarily confusing because it can only come from certain entities, and they've changed that. They changed it 2018, they changed it and add some things in. So the best thing to do is don't wait to register at the polls, get it done now. But otherwise there's a whole long list, like a utility bill. You can show it digitally, so you can show your bank account. Anyway, I won't go there.
Okay, thanks.
I know the list. Plus I want to add too, like if you're a poll worker, you greatly appreciate people being in the poll book, because it backs everything up if you have to register.
All right, any final thoughts? Okay, thank you. I knew we'd go long today. Thank you, Mary Beth. And I'm going to do a shameless plug here because I think